I love political correctness. I revel in it. I envision a time when every man and woman, regardless of their race, color, and creed, will be able to coexist together and have a healthy dialogue among each other, regardless of your peculiar differences that you have. And everyone has these peculiar differences, something that, makes us stand up from the rest of the people. And that's something that makes us different, marvelous, and amazing. And we'll be able to understand each other and also live with it. We'll be able to tolerate each other's differences. All of us are different. We are born different. Unfortunately, I have strong suspicion that it will never happen outside of the US, outside of the European countries. I just don't see that happening in those countries, and I hope we will give them an example here by which they can emulate and be better and also be more open, like American and European societies are. We accept differences, we embrace them, we welcome people in, regardless of what the political climate is right now in America. I do feel that people are welcomed here. People want to come here. People want to build their lives. And that's very important for the continuation of this great country. This country was built on immigrants, was built on people from different backgrounds. And I hope that's something that America continues to espouse to this day. I don't want to envision this country to come to the point where things like that. I have this book over here called Malleus Maleficarum, the Witch Hammer. I hope, which discusses how to identify witches, what kind of witchcraft they practice, how they make a pact with the devil, how witches deprive man of their vital member. I hope this doesn't come to that. For example, I see right now the mass media, the social media are fighting against the masculine male. The old kind of proverbial image of what is to be a man is now being attacked, demolished. And people are coming to accept that. People are afraid to express their masculinity. That's why you see, I recently discovered there is such a movement as a MGTOW. MGTOW. You've probably seen that on YouTube. It's basically a community of men who became so disgusted with the new kind of female movement that is going on, and they had decided to opt out of the relationships. They look at women now as completely corruptible species almost, that had bought into this feminist propaganda and no longer responding to the chivalry that they once did. That our fathers and forefathers have taught us how to behave with women. Now women, don't expect that. They don't expect men to open the doors for them. They don't expect men to give up their seats, and for the man to treat women as a kind of fragile being. They don't expect that. So there is a whole community of men kind of confused in regards to the new, independent status of a woman. And they decided to opt out and exit from the relationships altogether. I listened to a couple of them on YouTube, and they seem to have a lot of anger. There is one YouTuber called actually something like a raging madman or something of that nature. I listened to his podcast a few times, and they seem to have this sexual frustration, and that's probably what breeds their anger, their anguish, and their disgust with the current social romantic situation that they're in. Then you have another movement, so to speak, and that movement basically kind of takes an opposite side of And that movement takes the opposite side of the miktos, and they say, well, we are still going to pursue women. And of course, I'm talking about the male movements right now, but and we're still going to pursue women. We're going to look better. We're going to, have a right, clothes on. We're going to make sure that we are dressed like a GQ, models. We're going to work out, 5 times a week in order for women to pay attention to us, in order to catch them and to be better at our game. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but this whole kind of clip is, dedicated toward political correctness. Is it good, bad, and why do I love it? I do love it. I do love that we are tolerating, embracing, and accepting the differences between each other. I do not like that one group is being attacked right now, which is kind of the traditional group of the masculine male. It seems that this is the only group that is being attacked. Conservatives are being attacked. The people that promote family values are being attacked. People that promote kind of traditional gender roles are being attacked everywhere. And it seems like the liberal-minded individuals have taken over the entire discourse on a public platform. It's impossible to voice your opinion, in public unless you are saying something that is politically correct or liberally slanted. It is disgusting. Like I said, I don't want to fall into this world over here when we look at the number of birthmarks on your body and test some of them with a needle to see how responding it is to pain and if there is hairs growing on it. And I'm not even kidding about that. That's how they used to test witches. They used to see if there is like a huge or any sizable birthmark, and they would actually test it with needle, poke it, burn it, and to see if the subject is responding to pain. That's how they did test witches, and if they didn't, they determined that it's a witch and they would burn it. I don't want to live in a society like that, regardless who is being persecuted, regardless of who is being labeled as unwanted in a society. I don't want to live in a country that ostracizes people for their speech, ostracizes people for what they believe or think. I was looking and reading a lot for many years on a subject of homosexuality, on a subject of sexual deviancy. And I came to the conclusion that unless someone is hurting somebody else, or unless somebody is engaging in a conduct with unconsented conduct, everything should go. If you are, if 2 or more consenting adults want to perform some kind of sexual activities, that should not be frowned upon. The society should not be outlawing it like they used to. They used to outlaw, homosexuality, lesbianism, and other what they called, sexual deviations. Perhaps that's why people did repress their, desires, their wants, actually what they were born with. And, the outcomes were depression. Outcomes were all sorts of psychological and psychiatric issues that they experienced. Instead, we should be celebrating each and every sexual desire as long as it happens between consenting adults. Another thing that I was thinking about in regards to political correctness, it's what is happening right now in the court system, and also between obviously, as many of you know, a lot of Muslim immigrants, or I should say immigrants from predominantly Muslim countries, are going into Europe right now, and obviously there is a tension that is being caused there. And recently I had discovered an article which I'm going to read right now with you. So it was originally published in the Washington Post, but I tried to pull up that article recently, and unfortunately to no avail. So I found there is another article published by AP on the same subject. It's called European court rejects Austrian's case over prophet slur. So there's some woman in Austria who had said that, prophet, the Prophet Muhammad of the Islamic faith was a pedophile. And the reason she said that because one of his wives was like 8 years old or something like that. So the European Court of Human Rights says an Austrian woman's conviction for calling the Prophet of Islam a pedophile did not breach her freedom of speech. The Strasbourg-based ECHR ruled Thursday that Austrian courts had carefully balanced her right to freedom of expression with the right of others to have their religious feelings protected. So in 2011, Austrian court had basically convicted, this lady of, convicted her and ordered her to pay a fine for basically, for calling, Prophet Muhammad a pedophile and his marriage to a young girl akin to pedophilia. And apparently the European court had basically upheld that Austrian's ruling. That's the world we live in, where you can't even say anything in regards to the other religion. Unfortunately, I cannot find the original article, published by the Washington Post. But just to give you a gist of it, in it, basically they gave the reasoning why the Austrian court had decided against this woman and fined her. She had what the Austrian court said is that this lady had failed to provide a historical and cultural context when she made those comments. The court had not taken it as a free speech, and instead they looked at it from something that can actually upset the existing peace in Europe. And therefore they had fined her to prevent anybody else like that to express opinions of the sorts. So if you are expressing your opinion, just make sure you have a bunch of disclaimers at the beginning and at the end of your speech or of your opinion before you actually can, express it. So, be careful what you say. Not sure what kind of historical and cultural context she could provide. I mean, what can she say? Oh yeah, at that time, in that particular era, it was okay to do this thing. So therefore, according to our standards, it would be abhorrent, to marry this young girl, but, 15 centuries ago, it was okay. I think that's what they wanted, right? If she said something of that nature, I'm sure the court would have dismissed this case as superfluous. But since she had failed to do that, had failed to give you 1,000 disclaimers, you're gonna have to pay a fine of 480 euros. Not a hefty fine, but nonetheless, it sets a very bad precedent in terms of free speech. After reading this case about this lady, and her expressions about the Islamic faith and the Prophet Muhammad in particular, it kind of reminded me of how many times was Christ called a bastard. How many times, actually, I believe in Quran it says that. In one of the passages, it says that Christ never arose from the dead. He was actually stolen from the cross, and then later, people, his believers, his followers claimed he rose from the dead, but he never did. It was kind of a big lie. He was an imposter, and some religious works and some religious groups called Jesus Christ a bastard. Should they be convicted too? Why don't they get convicted, and why don't they pay a fine? What about people that say that Buddha was ugly and that he was an one eyebrow man and he was ugly and probably smelly and so forth? Should they be fined as well? Should the people who say that Saint Paul, the Saint Paul who on the road to Emmaus saw Jesus Christ and became the follower of Jesus, that he was himself kind of unpopular with women, that's why he kind of created the Christianity and became such a zealot for whatever religious movement he was part of? why don't they get convicted as well? It seems like it's very one-sided. If you say something against Islam because there is a huge inflow of people of that particular religion into the Europe and into the US, so you get convicted and you have to pay a fine. But if you say the same thing against Christianity, that's okay. Throughout the time, throughout the history, we all lived in certain systems. In the old world, before the United States came into fruition, there was a world that was ruled by Catholicism or by Christianity, by Protestant Christianity. It was the world where we were spied upon and where we were harassed and where we were policed by the Jesuits, the Jesuit society that made sure that we abide by their laws, by their moral code. Obviously now we had, then later on in the US, we had different morality. We had the Puritan system and worldview. During the Cold War, there was a hunt for, communists. Now there is seemingly a hunt for anything that is called traditional or, used to be called normal, right? Against family values, against, the masculine male, so to speak. What had remained throughout this entire time was human nature. Human nature never changed. Human life always prevails. Human nature always prevails. That's why I'm not, at the end of the day, too worried about either the feminist movement or anything else. It will all balance itself out. One thing I do want to see is acceptance and tolerance for all, where everybody will be able to coexist with each other, regardless of their color, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their peculiar differences. So I do love the political correctness, not to the point where it's hurting some group of people, but to the point where it's actually welcoming, embracing, and allowing for every colorful remark to be heard in a public on a public platform. I'm very happy to see that conservative voices are being heard, and conservative voices are the ones that had elected, Mr. Trump into the presidency. That's a good sign. And one thing, I don't want to see the resurgence of this Malleus Maleficarum, the witch hammer. What I want to see the resurgence of is everyone coming together, existing, loving, and making this world a better place.